popular saying that everything wrong today can be traced back to 40th President Ronald Reagan. Can't afford health care? Fox News making your parents awkward at Thanksgiving? Why is your boyfriend wearing this to the function? Yes, all of these things can be linked back to Ronald Reagan, and today we're gonna find out. Hello girlies, class has begun. My name is Nikita, aka head professor at Bimbo University. One of my first very viral videos was on Reagan and his effect on the middle class. But there's only so much damage you can fit into a 2-minute video. Being a hater takes time. Which is why in this video we will be exploring Reagan's impact as president, how his policies shifted our quality of life today, and some of his similarities with Trump. I'm not exploring his run as governor, nor am I exploring his impact as an actor, because that wouldn't be much of a video. It would be a sentence. Without further ado, let's begin. Actually, before I begin, I want to give a quick shout out to Rode Mic for giving me these mics. They sound so crisp and clear. It is hot in New York today. I have the AC on, but you can't even hear it. And I want to shout out you guys for telling me to fix my sound. Hopefully this helps. Now, without further ado, let's begin. See, I lied, like Reagan. Oopsie. Some of you may be thinking, who cares? Politics doesn't affect my life. I wake up, I go to work or school, and I come home. Which is exactly what Reagan would have wanted you to think. See, Reagan believed in the philosophy that you are in charge of your own destiny. If you succeed, it's on you. If you fail, it's on you. And this became the guiding mantra not only for Reagan's presidency, but for the Republicans for the next 40 years and today. Reagan was an extremely popular president for Republicans. In fact, Reagan was to conservatives what Pedro Pascal is to depressed bisexuals, what Hailey Bieber is to girls who work in PR, what a fish is to a man on Hinge. You get the point. Maybe you're thinking, I am in charge of my life, and that's not wrong. And I get it. But by the end of this video, I guarantee you'll start to see the cracks in that philosophy. So let's go back in time and paint a picture of the America that Reagan inherited in 1980. In the 1930s, America went through the Great Depression, the worst economic disaster in history, and it was caused by an unregulated stock market. This is when the government decided enough is enough. The government should regulate businesses so this doesn't happen again. The government should also help people out and get them out of this depression. This is when we start to see safety nets such as unemployment insurance, food stamps, housing aid, and welfare programs start so that people could get back on their feet. A hand up, not a handout. Then a couple things happened that really set the stage for Reagan to become president. Economic crisis, a distrust in government, and a highly televised war that made people question government spending. Does this all sound familiar? It's a very similar chain of events that led us into a Trump presidency. An economic crisis due to COVID, a distrust in government as we saw a clearly unwell and aging Biden unable to perform his duties, and a highly televised war that made people question government spending. I mean, hello. But of course for Reagan, it was a different set of events. So when Reagan took office, America was experiencing stagflation. That's when inflation is high and unemployment is high. What a treat. The economy was stagnant. The Watergate scandal of 1972 severely impacted people's trust in government. Now, I won't get too much into the scandal, but all you have to know, a short summary, is that Nixon hired men to get dirt on his opposers' campaign so that Nixon could leverage that information and use it in his re-election campaign. People trusted the government, but after Watergate, they didn't. And they yearned for a president who was honest and who knew what he was doing, or at least looked like he knew. And finally, the war on TV. The Vietnam War was the first war in history to be televised, and the first time people could see the death and destruction and be like, this is where my taxes are going to? Really? This disillusionment with everything set the stage for Reagan to shrink the role of government, not expand it.
Make America great again.
Yes, Reagan's campaign slogan was also Make America Great Again. His acting chops enabled him to give powerful speeches, just like Trump. Reagan was also the first influencer president who would do sponsored content for General Electric.
In every struggle, there has to be a winner.
Trump was the first reality TV president. I mean, the similarities are crazy. Reagan was the first president to straight up lie. Other presidents had exaggerated the truth for sure, but Reagan, he lived in a whole new reality. One of his most popular lies that still exists today is the so-called welfare queen. A welfare queen is a woman, typically black, who abuses the welfare system funded by your taxes and extracts it for all it's worth. Remember the welfare system Food and housing programs were created to get people back on their feet after the Great Depression. Well, that was all fine until Linda Taylor. Reagan invoked the case of Linda Taylor, a woman who used 80 names, 30 addresses, 12 social security cards to get food stamps, veteran benefits for her 4 non-existent deceased veteran husbands. She cheated the welfare system out of $150,000 allegedly. That's $150,000 of your tax money. Now, Linda Taylor did exist, and she did defraud the government, but not of $150,000, of $8,000. But it was too late. The mythical welfare queen was out to steal your hard-earned money. This led people to believe that social programs were wrong and that we should cut them. So let's find out what Reagan cut and how those cuts affected life in the 80s as well as now. Beginning with housing. Ever thought that you should skip out on matcha and an avocado toast so you can save that money to buy a house? Well, let me tell you that your affinity for sweet treats is not what's stopping you from getting a house. Before Reagan, the federal government used to build a lot of housing. This created a large supply of houses, and because of supply and demand, when there's a lot of something, it's not that rare, so it's pretty affordable. People could buy family homes on a single person's income. You could buy your own home on your own income. Roommates didn't exist. Non-binary people with toxic landlords were nowhere to be found. And all that changed because of Reagan's philosophy that you're responsible for your own success. If you want a house, it's not the government's responsibility, it's yours. So Reagan cut public housing programs, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development saw a 40% budget cut during his presidency. This massively shrunk the housing supply, and so prices shot up. Housing then became known as a luxury symbol rather than a necessity. In 1979, the average house price was $70,000. Today, it's $500,000. The slashing of public housing led to a spike in homelessness. Something happened in the 60s and 70s that absolutely rocked Republicans to the core. Civil rights movements, women's movements, and the anti-war movement. College protesters were getting a little too smart and questioning the government. They were saying unhinged things like stop the war. Women and minorities were becoming too smart and saying unhinged things like I want equal rights and equal pay. Maybe a credit card. This is a problem.
See, I think there are 2 ways in which people are controlled. First of all, frighten people, and secondly, demoralize them. An educated, healthy, and confident nation is harder to govern.
Before Reagan, education was seen as a human right, but the issue was that people now were becoming too educated and demanding more from their lives. So Reagan's advisor said this exact words, that we are in danger of an educated population and we have to be more selective about who we let in. So Reagan cut government funding to public universities, and in California when he was governor, he stopped making colleges free. He didn't say that people were becoming too smart. That would be wild. He said, you're in charge of your own destiny. If you can't afford college, that's on you. Colleges have to make money somehow, so they began charging students for tuition. Reagan also made it easy around this time to get a loan, so colleges increased their costs even more, saying, why does it matter? People are getting a loan anyway. And that's how we ended up here, with nationwide student debt reaching $1.6 trillion. In the 80s, student loan was nationwide at about $10 million, and before that, none, because it was free. Now we get to Reagan's most famous legacy, trickle-down economics. The belief that cutting taxes for the wealthy and corporations would lead them to saving money, and they'd use that money to then hire people and create jobs. So wealth would trickle down to the middle class. Back up, what is the middle class? So before Reagan, the rich were taxed at 70%, so the not rich paid less. They could save money for buying things and moving up. The middle class consisted of people who weren't filthy rich but could make enough money to buy a house, to support their children and spouse, go on vacation, and in some cases they had a whole second family. Reagan ruined their chances to love and support our side chicks. Okay, but how? Because trickle-down economics didn't work. Because, spoiler, the rich and corporations hoarded their wealth, widening the divide between rich and poor. In my TikTok, I gave an example of why trickle-down economics doesn't work. Imagine people with 100 followers got 2 skincare products, and imagine people with 1 million followers got 20 skincare products with the assumption that they would share their skincare products with everyone else. Well, guess what? Just like money, you can never have enough skincare products. And so then what do? They hoard it. Still, the Reagan tax cuts persisted, and the rich went from paying 70% on their taxes to just 20%. But this widening gap between rich and poor is great for Reagan, because when you're too busy trying to survive, you're not focused on the government and what they're doing. In 1980, before Reagan was president, the average CEO earned 36 times of an average worker. Today, the average CEO earns 400 times of that of an average worker. Surely someone's got to stand up to that, right? That's where labor unions come in. Why do they matter? Because unions stick up for workers' rights and to make sure that we aren't being taken advantage of. Think of some of the work-related issues we face today. Being expected to work past 5 p.m. Bosses can fire you whenever they want. Being replaced by AI. And the worst, that judgy look your boss gives you when you ask for PTO. Unions are meant to bargain with employers and protect you from this treatment. That is, if unions are strong. And unions used to be strong. Before Reagan, union membership was at its highest. 1 in 3 Americans were part of a union. Unions brought about the 8-hour workday down from 16. Unions also introduced the 2-day weekend that we know and love today. Along with those classics, we also saw an end to child labor laws thanks to unions. Yet Reagan hated unions. He hated when people spoke up for themselves. This was especially prominent when PATCO, the Union of Air Traffic Controllers, went on strike to demand better pay. Since air traffic controllers were technically government employees, they weren't allowed to strike. Reagan demanded that they return to the office, otherwise they will get fired. 90% of them did not return to the office. So in August of 1981, Reagan fired close to 12,000 air traffic controllers. I, for one, can't even believe that many air traffic controllers once existed, considering Newark has like one. The confidence of America's labor movement was poof. Prior to Reagan's presidency, there were 200 to 400 strikes a year. By the 80s, that number averaged at about 187. In 2017, there were only 7 strikes. It really makes you wonder, if Reagan hadn't decimated unions, would we have a 3-day weekend? Would you be able to take PTO without your boss guilt-tripping you? Oh, this is giving me a headache. But I won't go to the doctor because that's too expensive. Why is it expensive? Reagan. Remember, Reagan's motivation for cutting social programs was that people rely too much on the government. You're in charge of your own destiny, and your successes and your failures are because of you. Somehow, that logic applied to healthcare as well. Reagan cut federal funding from Medicare and Medicaid, and here's exactly what changed. Before Reagan, whenever a hospital did a surgery and treatment, Medicare and insurance companies would pay that exact cost plus a little bit more for profit. So for example, if a surgery cost $5,000, insurance would pay $5,000. Because of Reagan's cuts, they lost the money to cover the full cost. So instead, no matter how much a treatment cost, Medicare would pay a fixed amount. So for example, say Medicare pays $1,000 no matter if it's a cold or if it's a surgery that someone came into the hospital. If the hospital completes the treatment for under $1,000, they make money. If the hospital completes the treatment for over $1,000, they lose that money. In order to be able to cover their losses, hospitals began charging for everything. Office visit, blood test, seeing a doctor, breathing, who knows? Also now, instead of people's taxes funding health insurance, private companies are funding it, and private companies want to maximize profits as much as possible. You can see in this graph exactly when Americans started to pay more for healthcare with no additions to their life expectancy. What happened right there? Reagan got elected. Do you see why when I say everything is linked to Reagan, I mean everything? Are you ever out on a date with a man from Hinge and he's wearing this number? Where are the guys that used to dress like this and play with makeup and androgyny? Well, let's see how Reagan got himself wrapped up into this one. So in the early 1980s, the CDC began noticing a strain of pneumonia that was affecting otherwise healthy gay men. Other people that were affected by the sickness were needle users. This later became to be known as AIDS, and it got so serious that 1 in 9 gay men would be affected. Many of them ended up dying, definitely ostracized from society for even having it. Reagan not only ignored AIDS for 6 years of his 2-term presidency, he referred to it as a gay disease. This caused a lot of panic in the public and led to the discrimination of gay people. Gay people were fired from their jobs and they were banned from restaurants. Straight men, in an effort to not appear gay and not be confused with gay men, severely toned down their fashion, and masculinity became being equated with neutrals instead of flamboyant. Reagan's lack of action towards AIDS absolutely devastated the gay and trans community, presiding over 90,000 deaths. He believed that everyone is in charge of their own destiny, that your success and your failures are your own, and therefore he believed that AIDS was a moral crisis. An unsung hero of this time is Princess Diana. In 1987, a photo of hers went viral where she shook hands with a man suffering from AIDS. Until then, people thought AIDS could be transmitted through touch, which of course led to massive discrimination of gay people, even people who got abandoned by their families just because they had AIDS. Princess Diana's acknowledgement of AIDS also made it more mainstream and not some fringe disease. It was around that year that Reagan began taking steps to correct the disease. Once again, women saved the day. And speaking of women saving the day, did you know that the reason lesbians are first in the LGBTQ acronym is because of this era? Lesbians showed up in droves to donate blood to gay men when doctors and scientists refused to take care of them. Whew, that was heavy stuff. There's more damage that Reagan has done, but I wanted to pause and give you guys a breath of fresh air. A lot of really good things came out of Reagan's presidency too. For example, punk rock as a genre grew out of dissatisfaction with Reagan's policies. Emo music is a branch of this, so if you're a millennial who went through an emo phase, chances are you wouldn't have done that if Reagan wasn't president, and maybe your hair would be actually healthy today. One of Reagan's greatest indirect contributions was hip-hop. I mean, this man screwed over the black community so badly that the genre exploded in the 80s, inspiring a rebelliousness in its audience and an encouragement to stand up to justice. Reagan believed that you choose your own destiny, but some people don't have much of a choice because of how the government has affected their lives. For example, picture this. You're going to a club. The club says that you have to dress nicely and get your hair done, otherwise you won't get in. The club is across the street from you, so you walk just 2 minutes, looking slick, hair done, outfit unwrinkled. The bouncer lets you in immediately. Now your friend also wants to go to the club, but she lives an hour away. Ubers don't go to her house, so she walks. On the way, her hair gets frizzy, her makeup fades, her outfit gets wrinkled. She doesn't look great. When she gets to the club, the bouncer takes one look at her and says, "Absolutely not, you can't get in." She says, "It's not my fault, I live a whole hour away from here." Now, would you tell your friend that you just didn't want it hard enough? Reagan's war on drugs set back black Americans in this way. Whatever opportunity of equality they sought after was severely impacted. But how did drugs affect a whole population? In the 80s, crime was getting bad. Because of a bad economy, people couldn't afford basic necessities. White people were leaving cities for the suburbs, so the cities lost a lot of tax revenues, which meant they couldn't fund their programs. This left a lot of working class black and Latino people in bad condition. At the same time, Coke was becoming popular. Sniff, sniff. Crack was the more affordable version of Coke, which became popular in black communities. Now, the drug usage during that time wasn't even that bad, but Reagan needed a scapegoat. So instead of blaming poverty, he would say there is a drug problem and the drugs is what's causing all of this crime. In 1986, he granted the police almost $2 billion to catch drug offenders, and it was a little unfair and a little racially motivated because people who had just 5 grams of crack would go to prison for 5 years, whereas for people who carried cocaine, they had to have 500 grams before they could be sent to prison for 5 years. So people living in these poor, underfunded neighborhoods that were selling crack just to survive were now getting picked up by police and jailed. It was at this time that prisons became massively overcrowded with people, mostly black men. And this is when for-profit prisons came about, to take some of the load off of public prisons. But for-profit prisons make money when there's more people in the prisons, so now people are going to jail for like really small crimes. So Reagan says if you want to get a good job, you have to work hard and you have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But imagine you're a black kid in the 80s. Imagine that you have a parent that suddenly goes to jail and now there's no income coming into the house. What do? You probably pick up a job to support yourself and your family, but now you're not paying attention to school and you're falling behind your peers. So tell me, is that fair? For-profit prisons started then and they exist today, currently as detention centers for ICE. Immigrants who have done nothing wrong are being held there because the more of them there are, the more money these prisons make. Now, what would cause an otherwise good person to believe that immigrants who have done nothing wrong and black people who have done nothing wrong must be put away in prison? Well, this stuff wouldn't even have a chance of sticking if it wasn't for some very convincing people on TV telling you to believe that. Coincidentally, during Reagan's presidency, we see programs being cut that eventually led to Fox News. You see, before Reagan, there was a thing called the Fairness Doctrine, which required media to report on both sides of the story. Republicans repealed this doctrine, saying that the government should stay out of media. This paved the way for talk radio having free rein to talk about anything they want. And because there was no fairness doctrine, they didn't have to report on both sides of the story. In 1996, Fox News was funded with the clear goal to push the conservative agenda. Wow, we made it to the very last category. Now, I'm sure that Reagan spawned a bunch of other evil things, but we're ending it with a policy whose effects we were all around for: bank deregulation and how it caused the 2008 recession. And if you're watching this and you were not around during the 2008 recession, good for you, you're really smart. So to recap, Reaganomics refers to all of Reagan's philosophies: lower taxes, leave the government out of personal and business, and trickle-down economics. We've been over trickle-down economics and we've been over leaving the government out of personal life. Now it's time to talk about leaving the government out of business. On the surface, this seems encouraging of creativity. Let businesses innovate freely without the pressure of government telling them what to do. Let them create products that people want and let them make money so then they pay their hardworking employees. Everyone's happy. Rich people see the government like I see my friends when I'm drunk and I want to text my ex. Like I should be able to express myself however I want. But in reality, they should probably take my phone away. So is unregulated business good? The debate of the century. But since we're talking about Reagan specifically, let's see how that worked out. Corporations did not trickle down wealth, they hoarded. So where are all the fruits of that unregulated innovation going? To the CEOs. And when banks are unregulated, it's a totally different story. See, before Reagan, banks had restrictions on doing risky investments. Why? Because risky investments caused the Great Depression. A risky investment is one with high risk, high reward. All that to say, banks love playing with money because it makes them richer. But what happens if that risk fails? Well, it's people who lose their money. People lose their jobs. People lose their homes. It's this unregulated, risky behavior that led to the 2008 recession. So if you were locked in your room pretending you were a pop star while your parents were arguing about money downstairs, you have Reagan to thank. Now you might be wondering, oh brother, this guy stinks. Why is he so beloved by conservatives? Well, for many reasons. For one, Reagan was charismatic and he was respected. He was a strong central figure at a time when people needed guidance.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.
Reagan's economic policies did result in a boom period for the economy where the rich got richer, and he sold the idea that anyone can get successful, you just have to try hard enough, and that really inspired people. Reagan helped end the 46-year-old Cold War. I mean, this war had people afraid of being attacked in a nuclear bomb. Can you imagine the relief when that was over? Okay, now here are two Reagan traits that's gonna give some massive cognitive dissonance to the people on the left. You ready? Ooh, this is gonna hurt. Number one, Reagan was actually one of the few presidents who stood up to Israel. Actually one of the few presidents who held an arms embargo because Israel is being too destructive. Number two, Reagan designated more than 10 million acres of federal wilderness. Does it hurt? And finally, of course, there's keeping government out of business, which is something conservatives love. I mean, on the surface, the thing with capitalism is it is promising. America has awarded success and money to people from all over the world, from different backgrounds, getting a chance. My hot take is that capitalism is fine when people's basic needs of shelter and food are met and taken care of. And if every single person has an equal opportunity of success, then Bring it on. I mean, work hard, be creative, and you'll reap the awards. Sign me up. In many ways, Reagan's love of capitalism was a snake eating its own tail. By creating such a massive gap between the rich and the poor, by making housing unaffordable, and by creating policies that concentrate the wealth in the just top 1%, the rest of us don't even have a fighting chance of success. People try and they work really hard to make money, but corporations still raise prices with no consequences. People get fired with no consequences. The 1% is right across the street from the club, and the rest of us are an hour out, sometimes even more. Actually, let me take that back. The 1% is the club, and they're not letting people in, even though they say there's an open door policy. That's because of Reagan. Well, that's all, everyone. Class dismissed. I hope what you can learn from this is that nothing is ever your fault. It is always Ronald Reagan's. But seriously, bad presidents have existed since the dawn of this country. We had one then, and we have one now. All we can do is redirect our anger towards the people in charge and be kind with one another. Also redirect it into some sick new art and music, so that people from the future can say, wow, Trump was terrible, but the people who were around then were really, really cool. So go make some art. Bye!